Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Glory to Jesus Christ.
Thank you, God.
So today we hear the gospel reading about the centurion. How this man has so much humility and also so much faith that he says to Jesus, I'm not even worthy that you should come under the roof of my house, because my house is defiled, because I'm a sinner. But I believe completely that you will heal my servant, and you have the complete authority to do it. And we see this great power of faith and of humility. Today we celebrate St Anastasia. She's the mother of St Sava, whose icon is in this analogy over here. St Anastasia is kind of a mysterious woman. We don't really know who her parents were. Every Serbian chronicler gives a different answer. No one seems to know. We know that she was royalty because she was married to Saint Simeon the Mrgashar, who at the time was Nemanja. He was a great czar, a great prince. And Saint Anastasia probably was Byzantine. Most likely she was, because her son, Saint Sava, knew Greek very well. And it's likely that she taught it to him as a child. So Saint Anastasia married Nemanja, the great Tsar, when she was 25, and that would have happened around 1150. So they had many children. They had 5 children, and they had a very good marriage. They were both very pious people. And when she was 50 and Nemanja was 61, they yet desired one more child. They were desperate for another child. They had 2 sons and 3 daughters, but they wanted one more child. So they prayed intensely, saying, we want one more child. And they fasted and they prayed. And even though she was 50, she gave birth to Saint Sava, whose name was Rostko. And from that time on, they were celibate. They lived with complete continence. They lived in abstinence for the rest of their marriage after this, because they said, God has given us this great gift. We will forego all pleasure from this point forward. And when Sava was 17, he escaped from them and went to Mount Athos. And this story is mostly about St. Anastasia, but it's important to know about St. Sava. St. Sava, who was Prince Rostko, he was lured away by these Russian monks who told him about salvation, about holiness, about piety. And the court of Nemanja was already very pious, but St. Sava, being very pious, was lured away to Mount Athos, and he fled away. And this happened, I believe, in 1192. So he was 17, and he escaped. And Nemanja sent soldiers after him to bring him back, saying, my son has gone mad, get him, bring him back. And they did an emergency tonsure on him. As the soldiers were coming, they tonsured him quickly up in this tower. And when the soldiers reached the courtyard of the monastery, he threw down his hair, because as a prince he had very long flowing hair. And when he was tonsured a monk, they cut his hair kind of in the bowl cut, which at the time was the style. And so he threw his hair down and he said, you cannot take me anywhere now, because I belong to God now. I can't go back with you. It does not matter how many soldiers you have, I cannot go with you anymore. And St. Sava progressed massively. He progressed massively. He became a great ascetic. In fact, he was so strict that at times people could see his spine through his stomach, because he fasted so intensely. And he lived an extremely pious life. And he wrote his father, and likely his mother, a massive tome. It was a huge letter telling them why they should give up their kingdom and become monastics. So 4 years after his escape, his parents did that. His parents went to church on Annunciation, and Simeon, who had Nemanja, who became Simeon, he had 2 other sons, and he gave Stefan, the oldest son, the kingdom. He said, you are now king, you're now czar. I am going to go to the monastery and repent. And Anastasia did too, whom we commemorate today. And we don't know much about Anastasia. She went to the monastery, but what we do know is she was godly. She taught her children the way of Christ. She was humble, because even though she was the parent, she obeyed her son. You know, it's typically not the greater who obey the lesser, but it's rather the lesser who obey the greater. And as mother, she should have commanded him, but instead he said to her, come to the monastery and repent. And she did. She was so humble. Her whole life was this kind of progression towards humility. We can already see she was ascetical. So she was prepared. She was prepared. And she went to the monastery, and her husband went to Mount Athos, joined St. Sava, and lived with him for a while. And then he reposed, because he was 80 years old or 81 years old when he became a monk. She was 71 when she became a monastic. She was 71 years old when she became a nun, and her husband was 82, I think. So Even though they entered into monasticism with old age, the Lord accepted this great sacrifice. He accepted this great act. And Simeon reposed on Athos. He went back to Serbia. His body was sent back, and his body began to gush myrrh. Myrrh began to pour out of his coffin, literally, like a river, or pour out of his coffin. And people would come to it, and they would be healed of every disease, every problem. Myrrh would literally just gush. And that's why he was called Simeon the myrrh streamer, the myrrh gusher, because he would gush. And she died, I believe, a few years after he did, honestly. And again, it's very mysterious. But what we can say about her was that she lived a life of preparation. She lived this pious life, and she was ready for wherever God would take her, right? She was ready to raise a child to become holy, and she did. And then when her life took another course, she was prepared to take that course. When her husband said, I'm going into the monastic life, she said, okay, I will too. And she was ready for this, because she lived such a pious and blessed life. And her station was not a monastic one. She was a princess, she was royalty, she was, I guess you could say, lay extraordinaire, right? So those of us who live in the world, this is no barrier to holiness, there's no barrier to our progression, there's no barrier to great things, right? She was a pious woman. We can tell that by her ascetic life, by her abstinence, by the way she lived. And her son was holy. And in fact, not only that, Stephan became a saint too. So, after St. Simeon died, St. Stephan was now king, and St. Sava became Archbishop of Serbia. He came back and helped his brother, and his brother was a good king. And his brother was sad though. Stephan was very sad because he said to Sava, I have not followed you and our father into monastic life. I didn't do that. I chose to be a king, and I'm a king. And I've carried my responsibilities, and this is what I've done. So he was kind of sad. And then, St. Sava was talking to him, and he died. He actually died. And he had been in a state of illness, and before he could be tonsured into monastic life, he died. So St. Sava, being so powerful, prayed over him, and raised him from the dead, tonsured him into the monastic life, and then he died shortly after. Right? So he also embraced this life too. And you think, well, he was also the son of this mother. Right? He was also her son too. So she became a saint, her husband became a saint, and two of her sons became saints. That's quite a powerful thing, right? For a Byzantine princess, right? We don't really know what her intentions were when she was young, but this is what her life became because she was always open to God. She was like the centurion. She had great faith, but she also had the humility to listen and to obey. Maybe the same with us. Amen.